All right, let's just jump right in. I want you to picture this. It's May 2021, and all of a sudden, up and down the U.S. East Coast, you've got gas stations with lines stretching for miles. Prices are just shooting through the roof, and a huge piece of our national infrastructure has just gone dark. And this wasn't some hurricane or natural disaster. Nope, this was a cyber attack.
So that leads to the big question we're going to tackle in this explainer. It sounds almost crazy, right? How could one single compromised password cause massive fuel shortages, full-blown panic buying, and even a national state of emergency? Let's dig in and see exactly how this went down.
Okay, so to really get the scale of this whole thing, you have to understand what we're talking about with this pipeline. This wasn't just some random pipe in the ground. This thing was basically the energy artery for the entire East Coast.
I mean, just look at this number, 45%. The Colonial Pipeline is responsible for transporting 45% of all the fuel used on the U.S. East Coast. We're talking nearly half the gasoline, the diesel, the jet fuel for millions and millions of people. And it all flows through this one system.
So just let that sink in for a moment. You have a 5,500-mile system pushing over 100 million gallons of fuel every single day, and it just stopped. On May 7th, the company made the call to proactively shut it all down. And well, the chaos started almost instantly. So the big question is, how did the hackers actually do it? This is where a tiny little crack in their digital armor led to a total system shutdown.
The weapon they used is called ransomware, and it's a really nasty but brutally effective form of digital extortion. Basically, hackers break into your system, they find all your important files, and they encrypt them. They lock them up tight, and then they send you a note saying, hey, if you ever want to see your data again, you're going to have to pay up. Your own information is literally held hostage.
So who was behind this? A group called DarkSide. Now, these guys weren't some government-backed spy agency. No, they were a criminal group, plain and simple. They even ran their operation like a business, a ransomware as a service model. And they even put out this kind of wild statement claiming their goal was just to make money and not to create problems for society. Yeah, I think we can all agree that didn't exactly pan out.
Okay, so here's exactly how the dominoes fell. It all started with one password. Just one. For a VPN account, which lets an employee log in remotely. And get this, that password had already been leaked in a totally separate data breach. But here's the absolute critical failure. That account didn't have multi-factor authentication. You know, MFA, that little code you get on your phone when you log in to prove it's really you. It wasn't turned on. That one missing step was like leaving the front door of a bank wide open with a welcome mat. The hackers just walked right in, vacuumed up 100 gigabytes of data, and then bam, they deployed the ransomware.
Now, this next part is absolutely crucial to understand. The hackers never actually got into the systems that control the physical pipeline itself, the valves and the pumps. That's called the OT, or Operational Technology Network. They only breached the business network, the IT side. That's the stuff that handles billing, email, accounting. So why did the pipeline shut down? Well, Colonial Pipeline got so worried that the ransomware could jump from their business network over to the pipeline controls, they made the decision to shut the whole thing down themselves. It was a preventative measure. And this quote from Colonial's CEO really just says it all. He said, if there was 1% chance that OT system was compromised, it was worth shutting the pipeline system down. I mean, think about that. Even a tiny 1% chance of a catastrophe was too high. They chose a definite massive disruption over a potentially world-ending disaster.
But, a precautionary shutdown like this doesn't stay a quiet corporate issue for long. The effects immediately started to ripple out into the real world, and what followed was just a wave of pure, widespread panic.
Just look at how fast this all spiraled out of control. Day 1, the pipeline halts. Just 2 days later, on day 3, the federal government is already issuing an emergency declaration. By day 5, the panic is in full swing. We're seeing major gas shortages, prices hitting a 7-year high, and those infamous pictures of cars lined up for blocks, yeah, that was happening all over the Southeast.
So, with this massive crisis just getting worse by the hour, the leadership at Colonial made a really tough and very controversial call. They paid the ransom. Yup, 75 Bitcoin, which at the time was worth about $4.4 million. All to get the digital key they needed to unlock their systems.
And the CEO later said, it was the hardest decision I made in my 39 years in the energy industry. He explained they felt they had to pay it because there was so much uncertainty about how bad the attack was.
And honestly, they just needed to get that pipeline, and by extension, the country, back up and running as fast as humanly possible.
But the story doesn't quite end there. In a really surprising twist a month later, the U.S. Department of Justice came out and announced that their crypto tracing experts had actually managed to follow the money and seize a huge chunk of that ransom back, about $2.3 million worth of the Bitcoin. Pretty incredible.
You know, this whole ordeal really served as a massive, massive wake-up call, not just for the energy industry, but for the entire country. It literally triggered a complete shift in how America thinks about cybersecurity.
In fact, experts started calling it a cybersecurity Pearl Harbor moment. And that powerful analogy really explains why the government's response was so huge and so fast. This attack exposed a fundamental vulnerability in the nation's most critical infrastructure that, frankly, could not be ignored any longer.
And the policy changes that followed were like night and day. Before the attack, cybersecurity for pipelines was mostly based on voluntary TSA guidelines. After the attack, it became mandatory. We went from a world with no required incident reporting to one where you have to report a ransom payment within 24 hours. The whole idea of leaving this up to private companies was just gone. It was a whole new era of federal oversight.
So, after all that, what are the big lessons here? What can we all take away from a national crisis that literally started with just one single stolen password?
Well, what are the key defenses? Number one, first and foremost, is multi-factor authentication, MFA. It's the one thing that almost certainly would have stopped this attack before it even started. Beyond that, it's about building defenses in layers. Things like network segmentation, which is like creating digital fire doors to stop a breach from spreading. Having an incident response plan, knowing what to do before you get hit. And of course, regular backups, having offline copies of your data so the hackers have zero leverage over you.
When you boil it all down, the breakdown is just stunningly simple. The biggest slice of the pie here was the lack of MFA, followed by just basic, poor password management. What this shows us is that this massive national incident wasn't caused by some super sophisticated sci-fi movie hack. No, it was caused by a failure to do the absolute basics of cybersecurity right.
And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. All of our infrastructure, the systems that give us power, water, fuel, it's all more connected and more digital than ever before. The Colonial Pipeline attack was a blaring, 5-alarm fire warning. So the question we all have to ask now is, have we really learned our lesson? Are we actually any more secure?